Today I would like to discuss the value of historiography. The importance of historiography is definitely excruciating for anyone who wants to learn history properly. And we can't say that without historiography there can't be history proper, because without method, without knowledge of history in general, you can go nowhere. So basically, without historiography, all you had to do would be to read sources without any filter, without any interpretation, without any method, and basically creating your own history without being influenced by anything that has ever been done before. Um, but I would like to concentrate especially on a particular part of historiography that is not the methodical part, the study of the instruments that the historian has and how he or she uses them, but rather historiography meant as the amount of works that historians have written, and from which, in general, we historians also learn history from, but and a more general public usually draws information from without getting into proper historical research on his own. This is a topic that might seem to be too strictly specifical for historians to discuss, but I would like to expand the issue a bit, exactly for what I was talking about before. That is, the general public normally reads books, history books, works written by historians, and says, "Look, what is written on this book is is correct because it's been written by a historian, and therefore, if he said that, it is true, and nobody can discuss that." And this is an attitude that actually is quite widespread, especially in this moment in history in which, especially through the internet, we have a a widened and broader possibility to read about history from lots of sources. Back in the days, who did read about history if he didn't have the money to buy history books or even the interest for doing it? Today, things are a bit different, and think about, I don't know, all the generations of historians that came out thanks to video games or movies and stuff like that. And not just of the historians, but for each of one of those historians, how many other people got interested about history and got some form of historical knowledge from these media, let's call them. However, now I would like to bring you into a perspective that I got by studying history and interacting with many other historians and scholars and professors, that therefore some of the most praisable history experts, and impressions that I got regarding historiography, I repeat, meant as the amount of history books written by historians, not much the method of historiography proper. The point is this, that if you want to be a historian, to do any kind of research, in academies, the first thing you have to do in general is to study a lot of historiography, a lot of history books written by other people. Now, in general, it's a positive, there is a positive outcome in this because you learn a huge amount of information that you wouldn't know anything about or that you wouldn't understand with that degree of sophistication. I don't know if it's the right word that the historical research should imply. And I myself read constantly about historiography on my own, even when I don't have to work for university, because it's a pleasure. It's possibly the fastest way to get a lot of good knowledge of history. The problem, though, is that as well as it's different, reading from studying. Um, so, getting historical informations from history books is one thing, but really going to look at sources is another. Which means this, that when you read a book, a history book, normally the goal of that book is, you know, expressing a thesis, there are some conclusions of that study, there is some form of, assumptions and results that research has implied. So normally history books are written in a way that does not really make you go straight into sources, into the sources that historian has written. And it's mostly like a read, if you want to go look at the sources, you can do it on your own, but normally you don't do it. The problem comes, and this is important to have the perspective of a historian, that is someone that works on sources, to get on sources. and and I must say that every single time that I had the chance to read a historiographical work and going on sources to read what that work actually means, on those sources actually mean, sorry, uh, you immediately noticed, I immediately noticed a great difference between what I got from the sources and what that historiographical study got from sources. And the point is that obviously, not being an expert, chances are that you got things wrong most of the times, and a historian that studied for years and years on a particular topic, we even, having studied much more before that than you, obviously knows more than you. However, and this can be seen through historiography itself, historians make an awful lot of mistakes, and if we want to get philosophical, we should also think that history is all wrong. you know, there are things that are true in the sense that, yeah, by approximation they are true. But, what happened back in the day, it's impossible to reconstruct. It happens even, if you talk with someone that you know about something you have seen together, you will have an opinion, that other person will have another, which doesn't mean that it's opposite, that it cannot, it cannot be conjugated, but it's still your impression of the thing, your story of the thing, and the other person's story of the thing. So historiography in itself, it's always a marshy ground, because until you don't go on sources, you can't really understand how fully that study is right. Now, there is not much we can do about it because otherwise we would stop making history. However, my advice, and this is what I want really to express in this monologue, is to always be aware of people who trust blindly historiography. And many professors do. I have found very good historians, so people that I respect and that I wouldn't, criticize negatively, for the sake of it, that um, were good historians in their field because they studied sources from, whatever they were studying. And however, on other topics, they didn't anything but trust blindly historiography, like saying things are in this way because in this book it's written so. And when you accidentally know something more about, what the author of that book wrote, and you make them notice, look, it's another perspective, you understand, no. They answer, no, it's not so because it's written in this book, and who are you to say that it's not true? Well, at that point, which is a legitimate question, and at that point the problem is that most of the time you don't have sources under your eyes. Most likely you're not even an expert, or not a particularly bright mind, and it's difficult to make that person understand that the world perspective he got from that work of historiography is wrong, because you have many other, knowledge that that person doesn't have. And the problem especially comes when maybe you're not an expert as well on those sources, but you know for sure, or at least with a good degree of reason, let's say by approximation, that by knowing other sources of other topics and other situations by analogy, which is a risky tool to use, but generally speaking, it's useful. You know that what is written in there is wrong, and that there is a better answer, there is a better explanation, and this often happens when there are ideological things in the middle. By ideology in this sense, I don't really mean something politically colored or stuff like that. I mean an ideology like saying, I don't know, that take for instance the historiographical temporal divisions of history. There are people who genuinely think that those times actually correspond to a different reality, that from the beginning of that period to the end of it somehow are homogeneous. And if you start telling them, look, but here it's different and there is this exception and things worked in a different way, you understand that many of them are quite, I don't know how to say that, reactionary, quite conservative, and they prefer to trust blindly their own historiography that confronting with a new idea. And what surprises you the most in this is that maybe that person, as I said before, is a very good historian. In his own field, has great knowledge, good knowledge, you think he's an intelligent person. But then maybe that person switches to a topic that is not wholly different, maybe is even related to the part of the history or the even the same topic he's expert on, and he cannot understand that. He lacks even the most basic knowledge. But why? Because it doesn't have autonomous critical skills. And why? Because he always trusted historiography. That is, adore the people who have written before you, and on their work write your own work if you find something new. I always had a wholly different perspective, that is, I don't trust anyone ever, not even myself, and I try to look at sources maybe with the help of historiography indeed, because without historiography you can't go anywhere if you want to be a good historian, but you never think that what is written in those books is the truth, that there is only that perspective, that there is only that vision of history. And I think that this is reasonably the best way to make history in general. And yet, sadly, I see that the great professors, those who go ahead, actually go ahead not because they have an autonomous mind, but because they learn to heart what someone else has written, and they take it for granted, with all the prejudices, with all the mistakes, and especially they boast that as if it was, a proof or, something that confers prestige to them. Well, I really have a different vision. So what's the moral of the story? The moral of the story is whatever you read, I will come back on this topic because I think it is of excruciating importance. Always doubt of what you're reading. Do not think it's all false. Do not think maybe not even the majority of what is written in there is false. Trying to understand why that person wrote that. But in this way, stay always open to changing your mind, to being objective, not to have prejudices, and to especially form an opinion on your own. And it doesn't matter that it's right, because we all make mistakes. Obviously, you should have an aim to do things right and to have a right opinion. But never think it's above critics, never think it's above doubts, that you cannot fail, that since it's your opinion, it has to be the only one, but still distrust people who think that their opinion is the only one, right? So, thank you for listening.